In August 1908, the skies over Brussels filled with smoke. For more than a week, the furnaces near the royal palace burned day and night, destroying wagon loads of documents. The King of Belgium was burning the records of his African empire. When asked why, he reportedly gave an answer that still chills historians today. He said, "The world had no right to know what he had done there. What he had done was preside over one of the greatest crimes of the modern age. A crime committed not by an army of conquest, but by a business. A crime that claimed millions of lives in the Congo, and a crime committed by a man who, in over 2 decades of absolute rule, never once set foot on African soil." This is the story of King Leopold II, the Congo Free State, and the ordinary people who exposed him to the world. If you value true stories from African history that too many classrooms skip, take 1 second to like this video and subscribe with the notification bell, because the African Chronicle releases a new documentary every single week. Our story begins not in Africa, but in the palaces of 19th century Europe. Leopold became King of the Belgians in 1865, ruler of a small young country, and it tormented him. He spent years obsessively studying maps and colonial reports, writing that a country as small as his needed a colony to become great. Europe's governments ignored him, so Leopold decided he would not acquire a colony as a king. He would acquire one as a private businessman. In 1879, he hired the most famous explorer alive, Henry Morton Stanley, the man who had found Dr. Livingstone. For 5 years, Stanley worked the Congo River Basin on Leopold's payroll, building stations and collecting hundreds of treaties from local chiefs. Many chiefs could not read the documents they marked. Few understood that the papers claimed to sign away their land forever. Meanwhile, Leopold ran one of history's great public relations campaigns. He founded associations with noble names, promising to end the slave trade, bring free commerce, and advance science and civilization. Newspapers celebrated him as a humanitarian king. It worked. At the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885, where European powers divided Africa among themselves, they recognized Leopold's claim. But here is the detail many people miss. The Congo was not given to Belgium. It became the personal, private property of Leopold himself. One man now owned a territory more than 70 times the size of his own kingdom, home to perhaps 20 million people. He named it, without irony, the Congo Free State. At first, the colony hunted ivory, but in the 1890s, the world discovered something that changed everything: the inflatable rubber tire. Bicycles and then automobiles created an explosion in demand for rubber, and the vines of the Congo rainforest were full of it. Leopold's agents were given rubber quotas and rewarded on commission. His private army, the Force Publique, was sent to enforce them. What followed, historians describe as a system of terror. Villages that missed their quotas faced raids. Family members were held hostage to force men into the forest. Communities that resisted were destroyed. And in the practice that became the dark symbol of the entire regime, soldiers were required to account for every bullet they fired by presenting a severed hand, proof they had not wasted ammunition. Baskets of hands became a currency of the system. Alongside the violence came exhaustion, hunger, and disease, as whole regions were consumed by the rubber machine. The true death toll can never be known, and historians continue to debate it. Estimates commonly range in the millions, with some scholars concluding the population may have fallen by as much as half. A loss sometimes put it up to 10 million people. Leopold, meanwhile, was building monuments, palaces, and grand arcades in Brussels with the profits. The humanitarian king was becoming one of the richest men in Europe, and he might have carried the secret to his grave if not for a handful of stubborn individuals that his empire could not silence. The first was an African-American journalist and historian named George Washington Williams. He traveled to the Congo in 1890, expecting a humanitarian paradise, and found the opposite. His open letter to Leopold used a phrase decades ahead of its time. He called the king's system crimes against humanity. Then came Edmund Dean Morel, a young shipping clerk in Liverpool. Checking cargo records, Morel noticed something devastatingly simple. Ships arrived from the Congo full of rubber and ivory, but sailed back carrying little besides weapons and soldiers. Nothing was being traded. The wealth, he realized, was being taken by force. Morel quit his job and dedicated his life to exposing Leopold. In 1903, the British government sent its consul, Roger Casement, on a fact-finding mission upriver. His official report the following year confirmed the horror in cold administrative detail. Missionaries added photographic evidence, images of maimed survivors that were projected in packed lecture halls across Britain and America. Together they built what many historians consider the first modern human rights campaign, the Congo Reform Association. Mark Twain wrote satire mocking the king. Arthur Conan Doyle wrote a book condemning him. The private empire was becoming a global scandal. Leopold fought back with propaganda, bribed journalists, and staged commissions. But even his own hand-picked investigators came back with findings he could not bury. By 1908, the pressure was unbearable. Leopold was forced to hand the Congo over to the Belgian state after extracting one final payment for himself. And that is when the furnaces of Brussels began to burn. Before the handover, Leopold ordered the archives of the Free State destroyed. The smoke rose over the city for days. The evidence of 2 decades turned to ash. Leopold died the following year, in 1909. He had never seen the Congo. At his funeral procession, something remarkable happened. His own people booed the coffin as it passed. But the story does not end there, and this is why it matters to everything else on this channel. The Congo remained a Belgian colony for another half-century, its wealth still flowing north. When independence finally came in 1960, the new nation inherited the borders, the wounds, and the plunder economy Leopold built. Its first elected leader, Patrice Lumumba, would be dead within a year. The soldier who eventually took power, Mobutu Sese Seko, would loot the country for 3 decades, a story we have already told on this channel. Leopold's statues stood across Belgium for a century. Only in recent years have they begun to come down as a new generation asks the question this video began with. How was one of history's greatest crimes hidden in plain sight? Part of the answer burned in those furnaces in 1908, but the rest survived in shipping records, in consular reports, in photographs, and in the testimony of the Congolese themselves. Evidence, it turns out, is very hard to burn completely. This is the African Chronicle, bringing you the most powerful true stories from African history. This video is the first chapter of our Congo Trilogy. Next comes Patrice Lumumba, the leader the Congo chose and the world betrayed, and the fall of Mobutu completes the story. The rise and fall of empires, dictators, and heroes every single week. Make sure you are subscribed with notifications on so you never miss an episode. We release new videos every week. Until next time, remember, Africa's history is world history. This has been the African Chronicle.